Doctor Who is the most unique show in the world. Every episode takes place in a different time, a different place, and can switch genres at the drop of a fez, which certainly keeps things interesting, but can also make the show wildly inconsistent at times. Remember when we went from the Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit right into Love and Monsters and Fear Her? Yeah, that was a strange time, wasn't it? This inconsistency can also be found within individual stories too. I'm Ellie for Who Culture, here with the 10 most divisive Doctor Who episodes. Number 10, Aliens of London and World War III. Christopher Eccleston's only series as the Doctor is criminally underrated, filled with stories and villains that are fantastic. Reference fully intended. But unfortunately, the first ever two-parter of modern Doctor Who is, well, what's the opposite of fantastic? Untastic? There you go, it's untastic. This is largely due to the Slitheen being among the weakest new villains in the revival. Their design isn't very inspiring, and the actors portraying them in human form are a touch too cheesy for a scheme that revolves around starting a Third World War. And who could forget the constant fart jokes that were intended as political satire? And while they may well fulfill that definition, a bit more subtlety would have greatly strengthened this aspect of the story. Looking back though, it isn't all bad. There's a compelling mystery at the heart of Aliens of London, and World War III ups the action considerably. This was also the first story to revisit Rose's home life, establishing a core strength of the first Russell T Davies era, while we were also introduced to Harriet Jones, former Prime Minister, one of the great recurring characters in those early New Who years. Number 9, Dark Water and Death in Heaven. Dark Water is rightly praised. Following the 12th Doctor and Clara as they attempt to find the recently deceased Danny Pink in what is claimed to be the afterlife, the episode has some awesome visuals, an effective slow burn mystery surrounding the Cybermen, and a killer twist with the enigmatic Missy revealing herself to be the Master. But concluding episode Death in Heaven unfortunately craps the bed a little, with a thoroughly underwhelming resolution in which Missy weirdly tries to give the Doctor a cyber army, while Danny lumps Clara with a kid who she then has to somehow return to Afghanistan without the Doctor's help, to a family she's not even sure is still alive. Middling quality and some other questionable decisions aside, hello Cyberbrig, this story was divisive for a whole other reason, with Dark Water becoming one of the most complained about Doctor Who episodes in history thanks to its infamous "Don't cremate me" twist. The BBC was forced to issue a response to the criticism, and whether or not you feel that this moment went too far, it undeniably pushed the show into a highly disturbing place. Number 8, The Beast Below. The second episode of the Matt Smith era further tests the relationship between the 11th Doctor and Amy Pond. Smith and Karen Gillan are on point, which is always a plus, and their moral conflict over the fate of the Star Whale carrying all of Great Britain on its back is Doctor Who drama at its finest, capped off with a beautiful final scene that really brings the whole thing together. The design of Starship UK is very cool indeed, and main villains, the Smilers, are appropriately creepy looking and actually quite memorable. But for a large section of fans, the episode falls flat. There's no denying that it's a big step down from the 11th hour, and much like a lot of the Stephen Moffat era, the plot suffers from too many great ideas at once. Even Moffat himself wasn't too keen on it at first, and went so far as to label it a mess before changing his mind and saying that he loved it. If even the writer of the episode is divided on it, it's no surprise that fans are too. Number 7, Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks. A recurring theme of episodes on this list are great concepts that are poorly executed, and this series' 3 two-parter is a great example. The Cult of Skaro quickly became fan favourites following their appearance in Doomsday, and placing them in 1930s New York, attempting to evolve beyond their shells, was an interesting way to continue their story. The setting is brilliantly realised, and the dynamic between the Doctor and the Daleks, with the Doctor even helping them at one point, is riveting throughout. But the human-Dalek hybrid and its creative but grotesque design got a mixed reception from audiences, and it's not hard to see why. It was a good idea, but it looks and sounds ridiculous, and when your whole story hinges on it, you have to nail it or you're in trouble. Throw in the stupid pig slaves and the subplot involving an incredibly annoying Tallulah, and it's a story that has its fair share of ups and downs. On a more positive note, revisiting this story and seeing a young pre-fame Andrew Garfield is really cool. A reminder that even the biggest of Hollywood stars has a history with the Doctor. Number 6, The Next Doctor. Following the news that David Tennant would be leaving Doctor Who, speculation was rife about who would replace one of the most popular incarnations of the Time Lord. And when it was announced that the very next Christmas special was called The Next Doctor, people were chomping at the bit to see what would happen. Of course, the title and the casting of David Morrissey as the Doctor was a red herring, with Morrissey instead playing Jackson Lake, a man who only thinks he's the Doctor. It's not a bad concept, and Morrissey plays the part very well, but the bait and switch was a huge letdown to some fans, a problem Russell T Davies is currently dealing with in 2024 as well. The story itself is lacking too, with an underwhelming Cyberman plot that concludes with an over-the-top giant Cyberman Transformer Power Rangers robot terrorizing Victorian London. It's not the worst Christmas special in the world though. The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe definitely takes that crown. Morrissey and Tennant are a fun duo, and there are a handful of really lovely moments, like Jackson finally getting to step inside the TARDIS, but it's nowhere near the best Christmas special either. Number 5, 73 Yards. Doctor Who's latest season might be one of its most divisive ever, with almost every single episode firmly splitting opinion. One of the most talked about stories was 73 Yards, a Doctor Light installment that saw companion Ruby haunted by a mysterious woman. Some hailed it as a horror classic that will be remembered for years to come, while others found it frustrating and confusing. There's no denying it's incredibly atmospheric in that first half, and that the concept of an ever-present spectral figure stalking you for life is both highly original and utterly chilling, while Millie Gibson shines despite the pressure of being the sole lead. The second half with its undercut Roger Ap Williams subplot is nowhere near as good though, and the final sequences, while very emotional, left a lot of people scratching their heads about what the hell just happened. 73 Yards is still very fresh, so it remains to be seen exactly how it will age, and whether or not parts of it will be expanded upon or answered in the future. But for now, it's very much a tale of two halves. Number 4, It Takes You Away. In a series that contains some of the most widely panned episodes of the revival, It Takes You Away had a lot more going for it than some of the others, but was nonetheless a divisive entry. Bradley Walsh's performance as Graham was the standout once again, and his reunion with late wife Grace was touching and beautifully handled. In fact, the whole notion of a lonely sentient universe was very well realised, and a really neat concept for the show that's definitely worth revisiting at some point. But there was also a lot that didn't work. The whole anti-zone and killer moth section were nowhere near as engaging as the other bits, and the episode loses steam every single time we cut back there. It also feels like they really just wanted something for the characters to run from, and felt very out of place in an otherwise thought-provoking story. And of course, there's the talking frog. To some, this was a fantastic bit of Doctor Who weirdness, and was executed surprisingly well given the bizarre nature of the concept, but to many others, it was an absolute joke. Number 3, The End of Time. The End of Time is an unusual case. As the final regular story for the beloved 10th Doctor, it's a landmark moment in Doctor Who history, and signalled the end of one of the few unquestionable golden ages in the show's history. At the same time, you'll find many fans arguing that the story itself is a bit naff, mostly consisting of John Sim being weird for 2 hours, the dull Naismith subplot, and the utterly ridiculous Master Race sequences that undercut the stakes of an incredibly important story. The End of Time tries to be deadly serious, but ironically is so difficult to take seriously at times. Its highlights include some incredibly strong emotional beats and a marvellous appearance from the late Bernard Cribbins, along with a showstopper of a regeneration that gave Tennant the send-off he deserved. It's a story that has grown more and more divisive over the years, as the immediate afterglow from RTD1 has faded. At the time, there was obviously a lot of sadness surrounding Tennant's departure, and The End of Time undoubtedly benefited from that, but on re-evaluation, its flaws are more apparent. Number 2, Let's Kill Hitler. Following the mind-boggling twist that River Song, the best character, was the daughter of Amy and Rory, hype for the next episode was absolutely insane. And perhaps that's why Let's Kill Hitler isn't the most beloved of stories. It epitomises the major problem people have with Series 6. It's a bit all over the place. Not only does it have a very misleading title that doesn't at all represent the episode we got, but the Hitler story and the River story feel like two totally different episodes that were hastily crammed together, while the whole thing doesn't feel like the natural continuation of A Good Man Goes to War in the slightest, failing to address Amy and Rory's reaction to losing their daughter, and instead rushing through River's transformation from brainwashed assassin to loyal companion. On the flip side, there are plenty of fans who love River's journey in this episode, and overall there's no denying it's an incredibly fun romp, chock full of all that witty Moffat dialogue you'd expect, and some fantastic teases of the ongoing series arcs. It's not the worst episode in the world, but it should have been better, considering the incredible setup leading into it. Number 1, Hellbent. There could only be one winner. After the heartbreaking Face the Raven and the magnificent Heaven Sent, the Series 9 finale had a lot of expectation on its shoulders, and depending on who you ask, it either failed miserably or knocked it out of the park. The conclusion to the hybrid arc of Series 9 falls flat, and the return of Gallifrey and the Time Lords wasn't utilised as well as it could have been. Fans' biggest sticking point with the episode, though, is the resurrection of Clara, which undermined how well her death was handled in the previous episode. Not to mention the bold decision to make the Doctor the villain of the piece, which unsurprisingly divided opinion. But when Hellbent works, it really works. Peter Capaldi and Jenna Coleman are on electric form, and they carry the episode so damn well. The framing device of the Doctor and Clara in the diner, along with the revelation that the Doctor has forgotten her, is an example of Moffat's timey-wimey writing at its absolute best. And though there are definitely more people in the Clara should have stayed dead camp, plenty find her resurrection a natural way for the story to go. The Doctor and Clara were always a duo that pushed each other's limits, and so for the Doctor to go this far to save her was a fitting final note. No doubt Hellbent will be debated until the heat death of the universe. Is it the pinnacle of all that was wrong with the Moffat era, or misunderstood genius? You decide. And that concludes our list, but let's end on a positive note. For our favourite episodes of the revival, why not check out the 10 greatest modern Doctor Who episodes? In the meantime, I've been Ellie for Who Culture, and in the words of Riversong herself, goodbye, sweeties.